Welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about winning in a competitive market, strategies to make your offer irresistible. And we've got a super special guest on today, Mr. Jay Irvine of Showcase Realty. Jay, thank you for coming, brother.
Hey, Robert, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the reason why I wanted to bring Jay on is because Jay has an expertise that a lot of our other guests haven't had, and that is he has a focus as a listing agent in the state of Connecticut. And he has a large amount of listings that he's done over his career. And that gives him a really big edge that he can share with us about what you need as a buyer to get noticed, right? Because in today's market, it's very competitive for a buyer. It's a seller's market right now in 2024 in Connecticut. And one of the strongest seller's markets I think we've ever seen, definitely in the last 20 to 30 years that I know of, okay? So I wanted to bring Jay on to share that insight with you. So Jay, with that said, let's hop in and talk about some of the strategies that just make people's offers stand out. You're looking at offers every day. You have these properties on the market. You're getting dozens, maybe even hundreds of offers coming in.
Right.
Like, what's your process like to actually sift them out and vet them out?
Well, I think first off, some of the key things that a lot of people don't do is uncovering the needs of the seller. I get a lot of offers where I don't even have a conversation with the agent. And that's one of the first things that I think from the buying side that an agent should be doing is reaching out to the agent and uncovering the needs of the seller. What is the seller looking for? How am I going to be able to appeal our offer, right? In like a multiple offer situation, you kind of have to determine what leverage you have. If it's a multiple offer situation, is it not? Is the house been on the market for a long period of time? Or is it a new listing? How many days on market does it have? So there's things to consider before you even write your offer that you need to kind of do some recon, reaching out to the agent to determine that so that you can specifically kind of critique your offer to those sellers' needs, right?
I guess what I would say back to that is just right off the bat, you're saying that if you don't get a call from a buyer's agent, just introducing themselves, hey, we're sending over an offer. We're looking forward to working with you. If you don't get that call, that right there already puts them at the bottom of the pile. Like they're not at the top. Or let's put it another way. If that agent makes that call,
right,
then they have a much higher probability. They are going to the top. Even if it's a lower priced offer, you're still looking at it closer than you would had the call not come in, right? And I think today's day and age with technology, a lot of people, especially the younger generation, they just don't even call at all. And that's not good. I like getting on the phone at some points during the transaction. You have to vet out, like you said, get clues, plant seeds, right? Figure out what's going on. So that's huge. And I think that's one takeaway, that one thing that can bring you with a 50% better chance of getting your offer accepted is making that call. And not only the buyer's agent doing that call, but I would also add to it the lender. What if you also get a call from the lender? Hey, my buyers just put an offer in on your property. And let me tell you a little about what I've done to get them pre-approved, right? So
you took the words out of my mouth. Literally, I was just going to say, telling the agent, the listing agent, who the lender is. If they know the lender and they know that lender is reputable and can get the deal done, you already are getting to the top of the pile because they have a good relationship potentially already with the lender that the buyer's using. Definitely. So just telling the listing agent that it helped tremendously.
And I think it's going the extra mile because I think in today's market, it's so competitive that a lot of buyer's agents nowadays, especially with the recent settlement that we'll talk about, but they're just throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. They're sending out 100%. Offers. There's not really a strategy behind it. And it's unfortunate because as I've talked about, I've had buyers that switch agents and literally go from 3-4 offers not getting accepted, and then their first offer gets accepted with a new agent. Why? Right. It's because of the extra step. It's because of this red carpet VIP type of service that you need to have in today's market to stand out. I think the other thing that I want to mention is that price wasn't what you said, what your strategy is. It's not highest price right up front. It's the other thing. So how important is that initial offer price to that offer getting accepted or competing in multiple offer situations?
Well, so everybody thinks that just throwing the highest number out there is going to get you the deal. But I've had times as a listing agent, I have 20 offers and I don't take the highest offer that is 20, 30, 40,000 above what we end up going under contract. Because at the end of the day, after, once you've kind of fact-finded what the seller needs, it comes down to, the contingencies is the next thing when you're writing the offer. So the initial offer price has a lot to do with it. But once they get the price, we're diving deep into the contingencies, right? Because some people will want to do every single thing at an inspection. They're doing an appraisal. They can't cover an appraisal gap. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. Your initial offer price is important. You need to find out, is there highest and best, right? No. A lot of people, when they put an offer in, they just automatically expect that there's going to be a highest and best, especially in this market. So they don't go in initially with their highest offer. And what ends up happening is they put an offer in. They're almost scared to put in their highest amount because they want to wait and see what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put in a lower amount, and then you wait a couple days, and then we announce, hey, highest and best, get us a number, your best number. In the next 2 days, you got to go back to your client and say, hey, now we got to raise our offer. That initial price can make a big difference. I think if you go in strong sometimes, you could get the seller to sign right away. I've had times when I'm the shoes on the other foot or even representing the seller where I get a client, an agent that comes in, they write a great offer, great contingencies, but they say, listen, we're not waiting for a high. This is our offer. Very good. We want it signed tonight.
Yeah, I've actually seen that recently on a few deals where they said this offer expires at 6 p.m. today. And in the cases I've seen that, they actually get it because it gives them that sense of urgency. What you're saying really makes a lot of sense. And I think something that's so important is finding out the story of the seller as a buyer, specifically the buyer's agent, because people are like, oh, I'll go at it alone and I don't need a buyer's agent. But you do now more than ever because of this. You're not going to get this info on an MLS listed property without a buyer's agent, right? Nope. You're just not, unless, if it's not an on-market property, then I do agree there's certain situations that don't warrant a buyer's agent. But other than that, I think absolutely, and every first-time buyer really needs one. This recon is the difference between failure and success in today's market. And I'm talking about the extra due diligence, the extra time, and the extra care that the buyer's agent is going to take for their client, our listeners today, that are going to help them to get their offer accepted, to know what is the meal ticket of the seller. Is it closing in 30 days? Is it no inspection because they know there's some repairs that need to be done? Is it, appraisal gap coverage? What is their meal ticket? There's always something, right? There's usually one thing, maybe two, that if you show them that you can do that, it's there for you. It's ready. You just have to meet their needs. And unfortunately for buyers in a seller's market like we have today, this is a book that's being written. This is the way it is. It wasn't like this 5 years ago, okay? And it may not be like this 5 years from now, but it is right now. Prices continue to go up in Connecticut. The real estate market here is so strong, like I'm saying. So we need to prepare for this to continue for a while, right? One other thing I wanted to ask you about was the earnest money deposit, because I've seen different agents do this different ways. And I think a lot of first-time buyers are worried about how much money they're going to need up front. So how much of a role does the earnest money play? Would you take $1,000 earnest money if it's a really good offer? Or is there a certain point that looks like, no, we need more skin in the game? So tell me how you look at that.
Yeah. So again, it comes down to assessing the situation, if you're in a multiple offer situation or if you're not. So going into a multiple offer situation, I think that, well, first of all, in Connecticut, there are contingencies that protect buyers' deposits. And it does vary in certain counties. Sometimes it can favor the seller a little bit more on the deposit side versus the buyer. But in majority of the counties in Connecticut, the contingencies do favor the buyer. So their deposit is protected in many ways. So they are putting something down and, they may feel like, oh, I don't want to put a large deposit down because I'm going to lose it. But as long as their agent is on top of the dates, their money is protected. So when putting a deposit down, when you're assessing multiple offers, if I'm looking at somebody that is putting $20,000 deposit versus a $1,000 deposit, $20,000 deposit going to be more appealing. Why? Because it's going to show that the buyer's probably stronger financially, might have less problems with the mortgage company coming up. It also just shows how interested they are are in the property. I think that goes a long way. I can tell you every single multiple offer situation that I've had, I have never once had a seller say, I want the one, even if they're $20,000 over with the $1,000.
Well, and I think 1,000 isn't something I've seen lately. 5,000, 10,000 is probably, the norm right now that I'm seeing.
But it
1%.
used to be $1,000 deposit. Like people before this market, people were doing it. And I think educating your buyer that you need to come in a little bit. Obviously, you also have to assess what is their financing, right? So how much are they able to put down? They might not have the money based on the program they're doing, right?
Well, I think so. That's the big thing, right? If you're getting down payment assistance or a low money down loan, it's going to be hard to show your financial strength in this market. Exactly what he's saying, putting that earnest money. Well, if you're getting down payment assistance or a USDA loan or VA or something, why are you going to put down a $20,000 earnest money, right? Like why?
Right.
Most of those people can't. I'm more talking down payment assistance clients generally don't have that type of money to put down.
Right.
That's why they're getting the down payment assistance. That's where you're going to see the $5,000 or less deposit, right? But that's why it's so hard to get offers accepted right now with those borrowers. But what I want to say to all of our listeners is that you're going to need to come up with the money at some point for the down payment and closing, whether you're putting 3%, 5%, 20%. So by putting more of it on the front end and front loading it, it shows an agent like Jay, I'm serious and I want your house, okay? Regardless of what your price is, you could offer 30,000 under list, but if you say, look, here's 50 grand on a $300,000 house, money talks, right? Like that says a lot to say, whoa, wait a second. I know this offer is low, but look what this buyer's bringing to the table. They're obviously strong. They're obviously motivated. And maybe we should actually look at this, even though it's a lot lower than what we were thinking, right? So that's so big because I think most buyers have the money. They know what's going to be required.
Right.
The subset that doesn't have the money is, again, the very low money down, first-time buyer down payment assistance. And that's where you're going to have a disadvantage on this earnest money play, right? And you can use it as a strategy, though, to get your offer accepted. You can use it as a strategy to get your offer looked at where maybe it'd be thrown out otherwise, right? Because you're lowballing or offering at list where everyone else is way over. So that's huge. And I appreciate you really sharing that. So a few minutes ago, you talked about, vetting the lender and we said, lender calling you is big. Can you talk about the pre-approval letter and how you vet that out with the lender and how it can impact the attractiveness of the offer, right? So an out-of-state lender versus in-state, a big box lender versus, small local, whatever, like how do you vet that as a listing agent? What do you prefer?
So when I start narrowing down offers with my sellers, I make phone calls to the lenders to find out the credibility of the buyer. And I do ask the buyer's agent, give them a heads up, like, hey, am I able to make a phone call to the lender? Me personally, I like to go with somebody local, a smaller bank or a smaller brokerage versus a big box corporate company or an out-of-state agency. The deals that I've had that have fallen apart are usually those bigger box mortgage companies or, people that are out of state because they don't know the regulations. They also don't have that personal touch that you get working with a local bank or with a local loan officer, that they vet the clients the right way to make them be as appealing as possible to the seller. And, I think in terms of being pre-qualified versus pre-approved, you want to be don't want to be qualified,
That's the first question I get when a guy like you calls me and says, I'm looking at an offer. Well, are they fully pre-approved or where are you at? And when we can really talk about the process we've gone through and everything that we've done to vet out the buyer, it makes a huge difference. The other thing I would say on my end is reviews. A lot of people have told me they don't even call me. It's like, hey, I got your offer. I plugged your name into Google and we're good. Saw who you are and what you do and, you're vetted. So that's big too, is to work with a team that has the reputation on the lending side, because unfortunately, like Jay's saying, a lot of the big box lenders, a lot of the national lenders, go look them up on Google, go look them up on the BBB and their reviews and reputation. And it's unfortunate because they have the biggest marketing budgets, but in almost all cases, especially right now in today's market, that mass market lender or big box, as we call it, lender with the national footprint in a lot of cases is a retail lender, and they're not really giving the best service, the best advice, or the best terms, any of those. Whereas I feel like in other markets, in the past, you could get a good loan from certain banks and good advice, and there was a level of service. Unfortunately, the industry's changed. So, just as we've changed how our business operates and whatnot, so do us as buyers need to change where we're getting loans and kind of how we're operating on that level. So can you speak to the reviews or reputation part of it? Like, does that play in?
100%. I mean, I've had people that have said, hey, I looked up your lender. I've read great reviews about them. I think it's very important to work with somebody local because they're hands on the whole transaction. They're not passing it along to multiple people. I've had so many times that the buyers want to use their specific lender, and I will give them the option to go with somebody else that I know. They don't even know who they're talking to. They're not getting calls back from people. So, and then when the deal falls apart, they don't really know whose fault it was. I think really most importantly with the pre-approval, calling the lender, speaking to them, asking are, income and assets verified, how deep have you gone into it? Sometimes, they fully underwrite the loan before it's even under contract. So,
we try to do that absolutely as much as possible. And what I take the standpoint as a lender myself to say the stickier the deal or the more issues the deal has, the further I want to vet it, right? The further along I want to bring it in the process. Right. And I think the takeaway from your answer there is that anybody that's serious about buying a home needs to go through a thorough pre-approval process with a local lender, period, like end of story, because that is really a non-negotiable and that's the foundation. Where I feel like maybe in the past or other times in history, you could kind of roll in on a Sunday morning to an open house, say, oh, we like this place, and then in a day or two put your offer in and get an application going with a lender. But like now, if you don't come to the table with that, by the time you contact us and go through the process, you're long gone, especially if it was a good deal. That offer is being accepted in hours or days, right? Not like it was before, weeks in most cases. So moving along, what I want to talk about is closing timelines, because it's a big question that people ask me. How long is it going to take to close? How can we use closing timelines to enhance our offer, right? And make us stand out? How does the closing timelines play in? How can those be figured out? Like, is it just a conversation between you and the buyer's agent to know, like, hey, my seller needs to close in 30 days or my seller needs 3 months because they don't know where they're going? So talk a little about that, please.
Again, I think it comes down to communication and the agents communicating when they're writing an offer. I think so many times people just assume a seller wants to close quickly. I'll get an offer and it's like they want to we'll close in 30 days and it's a nice offer. And my seller was like, whoa, I need 60 or 90 days, right? So I think communicating and not assuming, what the seller wants in terms of timelines and, having that conversation up front, you'll be able to know where timeline you need to put it in the offer. So I just think when it comes down to closing timelines, obviously a buyer, the buyer's agent is vetting or speaking with the lender, and the lender might say, hey, we need at least 45 days to close, or we could do this in 30 days. So they may not have the option of doing the early close, but I think at least calling the listing agent and asking like, hey, where's your seller at? Like,
that's the only way to know. It's not like you're putting on the MLS listing must close in 45 days, right? You don't put that. So again, we talked about this in the beginning here and said, if that phone call is not made, if that communication, all of this stuff we're talking about never gets seen. Your agent just put an offer in for you for a 30-day close when the seller needs 60. It doesn't matter if you had the best price, right? It doesn't matter if you waived everything. You didn't meet their criteria to even have that offer on the top of the stack, right? So my question to you would be, if I'm a buyer and I put an offer in and my agent feels like, 30 days and the lender, we're ready to rock, will you go back to the buyer's agent and say, hey, man, we love the offer, but we can't do 30 days. We need 90 or we need 45. Like, is that even a conversation? Or are you like, well, I didn't hear anything from them, so we're not doing this deal, and it just kind of gets thrown away or goes to the wayside?
No, I think after reviewing what price and the contingencies, 100%, if the offer looks good and it's just a timeline, I'm going to make a phone call. I mean, every seller's individual is is an individual and has their own needs. If the seller is like, hey, I like this offer, but I can't close in 30 days. I need 60. I might call that agent and say, hey, can you bump this to 60? And they might say, yeah, no problem.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely something that we'll do. It doesn't just get pushed to the side.
But it really has a big incentive for them to know that up front versus having you say, hey, by the way, I know we haven't spoken, but my seller needs this extra time, versus that coming in up front. And it's like, hey, you need 60 days? We got a 60-day offer. The puzzle pieces need to fit together. And the more of them that can up front, the less friction, right? As we move through the process. You talked about contingencies, right?
Yeah. Just one sec before we switch that.
Okay.
So I think also, when people are writing offers, we're talking about communication, right? And how important that is up front. So, whether it's a multiple offer or not, if that agent doesn't make that phone call to that listing agent to find out that, do that fact finding about the seller, well, if they just write a blanket offer and they're the only offer in there, that time can kill a deal. And so they might be the only offer. They put in a early closing date, and that now delayed the signatures of the seller. So then the listing agent is calling the person back. Now this offer that could have been accepted within the same day, now it's dragging on to 2 days. And then another offer comes in. And now because you didn't communicate up front with that listing agent and find out about the seller, you delayed it. And now when you could have had it wrapped up, you're not.
That's such a great point. I see that all the time where it's like this back and forth, and an addendum or something can take days to get signed, and things change. And there's a saying I learned early in my career, which is time kills all deals.
Yes.
So the longer time you have during a deal, the more that can go wrong. And there's already so much that can go wrong that every day that passes is another potential offer. Someone stealing your cheese, as they say, or eating your cheese, So with that said, as we wrap up here, last few minutes, contingencies, they're huge when it comes to getting
100%.
offers accepted. So I wanted to save the best for last, right? Contingencies, how do those play in? What do you like to see? What do you not care about a contingent? Like, where do we draw the line, and what is like the perfect offer with what contingencies waived? Go through that with me.
Yeah. So I think that the two biggest contingencies are inspection and appraisal. It depends on if the buyer's a first-time home buyer. Like, it's I try not on the buy side to recommend a first-time home buyer to waive an inspection, right? And it depends on the specifics of the house. If it has a well and a septic, like, there's certain things that you could, if you're waiving an inspection, that it could be very costly to you. But the two biggest things are usually appraisal and inspection. Now, people are coming to the table, they're offering to either waive appraisal or do an appraisal gap coverage. So if the house doesn't appraise, they will cover it. They'll cover the difference between what the house appraised at and what the initial offer price was. I think those two are like the most important in really when you're coming down to contingencies. Another thing, as far as your mortgage contingency, I've seen some people will, have waived that as well, which almost can be like a cash deal.
With a TBD underwriter, if we're doing everything up front, the hard credit check, all the docs, like, let's get it reviewed by an underwriter and let's make it so you can waive the contingency. Just had a client get their offer accepted literally last week using that exact strategy. They had two identical offers, but my buyers waived that mortgage contingency because of the extra work we did up front. So I'm glad to hear that, like, that's something you're seeing, because I'm definitely seeing that a lot now too, to get that extra edge in today's market, right? For sure.
I think one thing that people do that they think is a big deal and it's really not is you see these offers that come in that it says, we're going to do an inspection for informational purposes.
Only. Yep.
You get that all the time. I tell my seller, this is almost just like a regular inspection. And I'll tell you why. Because if something major comes up, they're going to probably ask for that to be repaired. I don't really look at, when I get a informational purposes only, I tell my seller, they're saying this, but yes, if there's petty stuff that comes up, we could say, hey, it's for informational. But if it depends on what's important to the buyer, something that is a big deal really may not, but the buyer may think it is, and they might want to ask for it. So I think people do say inspection for informational purposes only, and then something comes up and they say, oh, wait, we want this to be repaired or we're going to walk away. So in my opinion, it's either waive the inspection.
Right. And I see that all the time, that informational purposes only. I do. And like you said, I've seen it go south For sure.
Yep.
You're not off the hook with that. So the last question I wanted to ask you was about the communication piece, because we talked about it's an underlying foundation of a real estate transaction, and
Right.
especially between the real estate agents, right? The buyer's agent and the listing agent. It's so, so important. So with that being said, let's talk through communication strategies like texting, email, phone calls, voicemail, like WhatsApp, there's all these Facebook Messenger. Let's get into that, because I'm doing all that with all my agents. Some of them were doing Facebook Messenger, some were on text, some were doing only email, and that's all they do. Others, I can't get on the phone, but we leave each other's voicemails and it just works, right?
Right.
So talk about your preferred communication, what you like to see from a buyer's agent. Obviously, we know phone calls are playing in, but this isn't a perfect world. Everyone's busy. So what if it's all text message? What if it's email? How do you vet that? And does that make a difference?
I think the two best is obviously phone calls and texting. Probably say email is my least preferred. I think really comes down to is just how effective of a communicator they are and how quickly are they to respond and get back to you, because that is something that when you have a very good agent that communicates well, it makes the transaction go so much smoother. A lot of the transaction is about the agents. They're both working together to the same goal to get the home closed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So communicating effectively with the buyer's agent and vice versa is what's going to make the process go smoothly. And then also problems arise, you're more than likely going to want to work it out with the agent because you built a relationship because you started communicating effectively from the get-go. So I like texting more than phone calls, to be honest. But, sometimes, when you're getting into a deep conversation, you just got to get on the phone and call.
Yeah. So, the approach that I like to take is, especially in these situations, is call first. And if you can't reach them, then text.
Yes,
and if there's
100%.
no response to a text, then we can move to an email chain or something like that.
Right.
You know what? That's 3 different communication channels. If they're not communicating back by call, text, or email, what's going on, right?
Right.
I think anybody in a real estate transaction, even if you're on vacation, because we all have that happen all the time, especially this time of year, you should be able to respond to an email, text, or phone call within 2 hours during the business day. Not saying you need to pick up right then and there if you're at Disney World or something, but text back, email back, call us on your lunch break, right? Something to say, hey, I'm still alive, I'm still here. It's an important foundation for a buyer's agent. So I would say if someone's listening to this going, my agent's not doing that for me, or I didn't know my agent's supposed to do all this extra work and all this communication. Yeah, they're supposed to do it, and they're getting paid for it now as of the NAR settlement, and it's known what they're getting paid, I should say. So now more than ever, they need to doing this legwork for you as an agent. It's not just, as your agent. It's not just writing a contract and sending it in. Any last thoughts on that?
No, I just think the first thing you do when I write an offer, first thing I do before I write it again is make that phone call to that agent, start vetting out the seller, finding out what leverage you have. Do you have any leverage? Very important. And starting that relationship up front will dramatically have an impact on your offer down the road and getting accepted. And agents like to work with agents they get along with 100%.
The huge thing though that you said that boggles me, that's my big takeaway from this, is that you're telling me that most of the offers, more than half the offers you get, do not include a personalized phone call, text, or email to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely.
And that right there, to our agents, to our pros listening in the industry, come on, guys, we're better than that as an industry. We are representing people in their biggest transaction of their lives in most cases. We need to give that white glove service now more than ever, because 100%. Now, again, talking to my buyer's agents out there, now you're actually explicitly being compensated for your value, and you weren't before, right? So I think that's a big takeaway too. And just by doing that extra step and making sure that you're working with pros that are doing this extra legwork, you're going to put yourself in the top 50% just with this communication method that we're talking about, these strategies we're talking about, and these ways to be able to win in this crazy seller's market. So Jay, for everyone that wants to reach out, given a lot of insight, I know you work with buyers, sellers, everybody in real estate, just give them your contact info. How can everyone get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my cell phone is 203-586-9459. You can find me on Instagram at CT Realtor J, and that's just the letter J. So at CT Realtor J. That's my Instagram, or on Facebook, which is Jay Irvine Realtor, or you can find me on Google as well as if you just search Jay Irvine Realtor. I work heavily with people that sell homes, but I also work with first-time home buyers. I like to give them that white glove service, walk them through everything, setting proper expectations up front, especially in this market, on what to expect. So yeah, that would be the best way to reach me.
And I can speak to saying I see that Jay's active in the market. I see his listings. I see the deals he's doing, and your team matters. As we always talk about, you want to make sure that your reputation is being represented by your lender and your realtor. So I can vouch for Jay and the transactions we've done to say, this is a guy you want on your team, whether it's buying or selling or any sort of real estate advice. So Jay, thank you for taking the time, brother. Appreciate it. I know your time is valuable. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you next time. Take care.